Welcome back to Coffee and Conversation. So for all you Audie fans, he's hibernating again. I guess he figures he did his bit for King and Country by showing his little face yesterday. I was surprised because it's very sunny today. It's cold, but it's sunny. Cold, it is 20 degrees Fahrenheit here. That is like 6 or 7 degrees below in the UK. We don't ordinarily get weather like this. Yes, it gets cold in January and February, but not like what we just had, which is an unusual cold snap and at least 2 snowfalls in the midst of all this. But it has been below freezing for 10 days. The temperature has not gone above 30 for 10 days. That part is unusual. Ordinarily, this time of year, it will fluctuate. You might have a few days, 2 or 3 days maybe, when the daytime highs are in the teens. And then it'll just climb back up to the low to mid 30s for a few days. That's ordinarily what we get. But we are in the middle of a cold snap, and I don't think they are expecting it to go above freezing until the middle of next week. And so for the first time, well, I have lived in this particular area, I'm tempted to say city. Technically, I am in a city, but the township calls my area a village. Just because I don't want to mislead you, I say city, you may be thinking Manhattan. No. Think farms and Mennonite neighbors next door. So we generally do not get this kind of weather. It's usually a little warmer, and again, there are more fluctuations in the temperature. So a few cold days followed by a few warmer days followed by a few cold days. And I've been here, that's what I started saying, I've been here for 15 years, and this is the first time I can remember a snowfall where the snow was still untouched by the sunshine for 10 days, because the snow in my yard is not receding. And I actually have one of the sunniest yards in the neighborhood, the village. And usually my snow melts first. Nope. We've still got snow. So I guess that's what's going on for Audie. However, many of you will be pleased to hear this because I know most of you know I've been looking for a GPS tracker for Audie's collar. Well, I'm getting one in today, and it's specifically a GPS tracker for cats. In the past, the GPS trackers I've looked at have mostly been variations on those, what are they called, Apple tags for your luggage. And my cat is not a piece of luggage. When was the last time your luggage chased a fox across a field or brought home a struggling little gopher in its mouth? The fact is, cats and luggage are not the same thing. So I am optimistic, and I'll keep you posted on that. All right, we are going to take a break for the intro. We will be right back. So, let's get right into it. Sunk cost fallacy. All right, that's what I want to talk about today. Now, I have mentioned this before, especially when we've been talking about decluttering, because the sunk cost fallacy, and I do not think I have ever actually framed it in those exact terms. That is one of the biggest handicaps most of us face in our daily lives, not just about decluttering. The sunk cost fallacy is that mindset we get into. Fallacy, remember? So it's not an accurate mindset. It is definitely an inaccurate mindset. When we have invested time, resources, money, emotions, whatever, into something, that something could be an item, a tangible item, the sofa that we wanted for so long, spent so much money on, and it's not working for us, but by golly, we're not going to donate it because we spent so much for it. Sunk cost fallacy. It could be a relationship that isn't working out. We've spent time in the relationship. I've been in this relationship for 5 years. We've been through so much together. I know it's not working. I know I'm not happy, but I've invested so much in this. I just can't walk away now. The job that we hate, but I'll get vested in the retirement program if I just wait 10, 15 more years. So the reason I wanted to talk about this is because, as I say, it's a fallacy, but it is so widespread. I would be willing to bet, like real money, and I never gamble with real money, that every last one of us has something in our lives that we apply the sunk cost fallacy to. I tend to do it with material things. You know, I'll look at something and say, this doesn't work for me. I should really donate it, but I spent so much money on it. That money is gone. And that's one of the things that we talked about when I've talked about decluttering. You don't have the money anymore. Time for the item to move on. You know, just, you have the item now. The item is not working. The item is not the money. The money has been spent. Gone, gone. Stop associating the two. But the way a sunk cost fallacy works is it's not just money. As I said, and I gave you some examples. It can be time. It can be energy. I've started to look around at where I am living right now, and I've started to ask myself, is it really worth me staying here? Maybe I should just put this property on the market, take out, the money. I don't have a mortgage, which, by the way, is part of my sunk cost fallacy, but you don't have a mortgage. You're not paying mortgage. You're not paying rent. You're living here for free, but am I really? And that's when the other factors come in. What about what it costs for upkeep and maintenance, the yard work, put a price on the inconvenience of being out in the middle of nowhere, etc., etc. And quite frankly, I'm sure if I sat down with a pencil and piece of paper and started totaling up those numbers, I would realize that I am, in fact, paying quite a bit of money for this, in addition to all of the money that I have tied up in the place. Because remember, no mortgage. I own this free and clear. That's money that is tied up in my home that I cannot access. In exchange, of course, I have a roof over my head. So I think I may be playing with a sunk cost fallacy here. I'm going to have to take a good hard look at that, because given the fact that I know it's a fallacy, I have no excuse for buying into this. But that is just one example of many. And we all have these in our lives. The most damaging, I think, are the relationship sunk cost fallacies. When we will stay in relationships, it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. It can be a family relationship. It can be a friendship. It can be, a social relationship. It could be the church you went to for many, many years that's just not meeting your needs anymore. But it's that history you have with the person, with the thing, the institution, whatever. And that history is somehow convincing you that because you put all this effort into it in the past, it would be stupid not to continue to do so. But here's the problem. It's usually stupid to continue. The stupid thing is throwing good money after bad, in a manner of speaking. And of course, I'm not trying to merchandise relationships. I understand these are very different things. But when we look at relationships, at friendships, at romantic partnerships, and they're not meeting our needs, maybe they never did, but when we look at them as something we have invested in, then it's hard for us to break away. It's hard for us to look at this and say, we need to cut our losses. We need to turn around, abandon this, and move our lives in a different direction. I think a lot of the reason that is hard for older people, well, there are two reasons. One, when you get older, the unknown becomes a bit scarier, because we are living in a world that, for a lot of us, it's hard to understand. It's hard to relate to. Many of us are put off by the technology. Some of us are very comfortable with the technology, but we may be put off by the aspects of the social relationships in this modern world. We don't understand what a Facebook friend is because we just had, like, IRL friends. And the mere fact that I have to call them IRL friends is very, very telling. IRL, in real life. And that is how we separate our reality from the online world. And when you have to do that, yeah, we are in a world we were never prepared for. And it can be, well, beyond merely confusing. It can be very alienating. And when you're feeling that sense of alienation, the natural tendency is to stick with what you know, stick with what is familiar, what is comfortable. But it's not just that. It's that we were also raised to believe something very different than what we're facing today. In the mid-20th century, we saw relationships, all relationships, as permanent. You get married, it is till death do you part, because we had a very low divorce rate. Now, it's completely different. Now, you can go to a clergy person, and when you are discussing your wedding vows for your upcoming wedding, half the time they will ask you if you want that bit about till death do you part in it, because you don't have to have it anymore. That is weird. I mean, I find that strange. You would think that the clergy would be the last group in the world to abandon that, but they are just adjusting to the times. The fact is that relationships are no longer permanent. We are no longer in that mid-century mold of, you grow up, you get married, you settle down, if not in the same city or county or, general geographic area as your family, you're usually not that far away. It was a little later in the century before you grew up, went to college, got your degree, got married, started your family, and then moved to the other coast. That was not something in our parents' vocabulary in terms of where their lives were going. So we see things, all kinds of things, as permanent, as investments. And that's just not how the world works anymore. Everything is becoming more and more temporary and transitory. I hear people in the financial world saying all the time, pretty soon you won't own anything and you'll be happy. It's like, what? First of all, I don't associate owning things with happiness. I know some people do, I do not. But still, would I be happy not to own the roof over my head? No. And the reason for that is because my parents, as you know, my parents both lived through the Great Depression and the Second World War. So owning the roof over your head for that whole generation was frightening to them if you didn't. Going into old age in a rental apartment to my parents' generation was a sign of poverty. It was a sign that something had gone drastically wrong in your life somewhere. The idea of older people downsizing and moving in to apartments or condos or other rental situations, our parents just couldn't deal with that. That is not what they were prepared for, because they had been raised to believe that you buy that house, that shows you made it. Oh, and your car. You had to have your house and your car. And 2 chickens in every pot. No, it's 2 cars in every garage, 2 chickens in a chicken. I don't remember. It will come to me. I think it was a chicken in every pot and 2 cars in every garage. But that was that catchphrase for suburban wealth, for having made it. Living in the city, for the most part, was not considered successful in our parents' generation. So many of them were immigrants who were raised in congested urban areas that going to the suburbs was their idea of success. And now I look at this and I think, I might be happier just renting somewhere, not having to deal with, mowing the lawn, or I have to be the one to find an electrician when, one of the lights goes out. I have to be the one to find a handy person if I need some repairs done. And I'm not sure this is really what I want to be doing. Wouldn't I be happier if I were in a city somewhere where I'd have an easier time getting around? Because remember, I don't drive. No one's ever going to give me a driver's license. Well, not if they're saying they're not. Yeah, I would be a menace on the road. And fortunately for me, at least I know that. I go out on the street, in the bus or walking, not driving, and I look at people driving all the time, and I think, they won't give me a driver's license because I'm blind. But here's the thing. I know I'm blind. This is not coming as a surprise to me, but I look at those people out on the road and think, they have no idea they're stupid. None. They can get a driver's license, and they have absolutely no idea how dangerous they are. At least I know how dangerous I would be. All right. Forgive my little dangerous driver's ramble. But that's why being in a city would be a lot more attractive to me, because not driving, being somewhere where there's good public transportation and I can get around the way I want to, it would give me a lot of freedom. And so I have been thinking about that. And when I start thinking about that, I start analyzing the sunk cost fallacy. Is that what I am seeing when I look at owning my own home? Or is it something else? Am I instead reacting to my parents, my grandparents, to those many generations, going back to when they first came to this country as immigrants and we'll work hard and we will buy a house. And that was such a big deal to them. Am I living their lives in the 21st century, given the fact that my grandparents, all of them, all four of my grandparents were born in the 19th century. Absolute truth. So here I am in the 21st century living by rules and paradigms that were set up for me by people who were born in the 19th century. Is that making sense? Because it's starting to look that way to me. So now I'm looking at this, trying to tease this apart. Is it sunk cost fallacy? Is sunk cost fallacy a piece of what is going on for me, even if it's not the core of it? It was absolutely the major guiding principle of my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation, the generations before them. The idea of abandoning what you have, what you had worked for, even if it's not working for you anymore, was just almost unthinkable for them. Most of our forebears, and when I say ours, I mean those of us in the United States, most of our forebears were driven to leave their homelands by such unbearable circumstances. Our Irish neighbors were forced out of their homeland by a famine that was literally killing everyone they saw on the streets. Not leaving meant dying. We have other friends and neighbors forced out by pogroms in Eastern Europe. We have others came to the United States to avoid religious persecution. They had so little choice. Their backs were so close up against that wall before they left that they were forced to abandon whatever they had. And when they came here, no, that was never happening again. We are here in the new world. We are going to work hard. We are going to buy that house, and we are going to live in it until we die. That was how they thought. And the reason I know this, of course, is because they communicated it to me. You know, my grandmother would go around with a chicken in a shopping bag. It's like she'd be walking down the street, there would be a chicken. Not a live chicken, like a dead plucked trust cooking chicken in her grocery bag. It's like, yeah, I got a chicken. Well, because she didn't want to have to deal with whatever it was they had to cope with in the Great Depression, which was possibly a lack of food. These were people whose values influenced our values. Many of these values were pushing us to wed ourselves to the sunk cost fallacy, but there were other factors involved. So, and that's why I want to throw this out to you, because I am starting to look at my own thinking, my own behaviors, my own ability to just analyze my own life, and thinking how much of this is based on faulty equations, on fallacies, things I know to be untrue. They may have been true for my grandparents. Are they true for me? No, of course not. But why is it that I can't break from them? And maybe I'm not doing myself any great favor. And I think we all have these. I would be willing to bet, and let me know in the comments, I would be willing to bet that every last one of us has at least one, probably many, many more, pieces of faulty reasoning that we cling to for dear life because our mother swore by this, our grandmother, our grandfather, whatever. This was the corner post of their existence, and they passed it on to us, and we've still got it somewhere. We know it's not true. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. That's all well and good if you are inclined to hard work, but that's not a piece of advice you would give to a real slacker who just doesn't want to get a job. So we have these, and we've grown up with them, and we think they are the truth, and we think they are wisdom, and they might very well be wisdom for someone else, but maybe not for us, maybe not in our circumstances. So the one I am wrestling with currently is the sunk cost fallacy. Why is it it's so hard for me to step away, look at my life objectively, and try to see whether or not I might be happier someplace else? Would I like to move? Would I like to be in a city? Would I like not to have the responsibilities of a home with a large yard? Oh, by the way, my large yard, those of you who live in rural areas are going to find this utterly laughable, but those of you who live in cities are going to understand completely. I have 1/3 of an acre. This is the largest piece of property I have ever owned in my entire life, because I have always lived in cities where you don't measure your lot in terms of acres. You measure it in terms of feet. And the property is like 50 feet by 150 feet. By the way, that's perfectly normal in many cities. And I'm looking at this thinking, I bet you could fit 4 of those city lots in this 1/3 of an acre that I have. And it's like I look at this and say, oh, I could grow crops and raise livestock. This yard is so big. It isn't really. But where I come from, of course, it's massive. It's practically a ranch. And maybe I need to look at things more objectively, step out of myself and start to ask, is this really what I need to be doing at this stage of my life? Mowing 1/3 of an acre once a week. How long is it going to be before that starts to become a real burden for me? Maybe I should reconsider. But wait, I don't have a mortgage. I own the roof over my head. If I go somewhere else, I might have to rent property. What if circumstances change? I could be evicted, and then I would have nowhere to go. And of course, keep in mind, those are my grandparents' and my great-grandparents' Depression-era fears coming out. Maybe I'm just not approaching it right. And as I say, for the moment, I am looking at the sunk cost fallacy, and I think that is probably having a completely disproportionate impact on my decision-making ability now. So I have got to pull myself out of that mindset. Anyway, that is what I have for you. It's sort of food for thought. Obviously, I want to hear from you. What is your take on it? Do you suffer for this? As I said before, I would be willing to bet we all have at least one area in our lives that we apply the sunk cost fallacy, no matter how clearly we can see that it is, in fact, a fallacy. There are some things we will just keep throwing good money after bad just because it's practically baked into our DNA, because those many generations before us believed this to be true. All right. Looking forward, as always, to hearing from you in the comments. Thank you for being with us. I hope you will be with us next time. Well, let's see. For those of you who join us for Just Chatting. It will be 8 o'clock New York City time. And in the meanwhile, we're going to see that slideshow, and you have a terrific day.